You claim little Jordan's biological father may be your own father. Mr. Belding and his mother have made false accusations about the paternity of your 3-year-old daughter, Jordan. Your test for Ms. Marsh to determine the extent of her relationship with your dad.
Then he moved back to Indiana and got a room, or he shared a room with Amber.
He had nowhere to go, so I took him in.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
It was
Really? Yes.
Excuse me, Your Honor. It was with me and my mom, as a matter of fact, and he slept in a totally different room. It was a 3-bedroom house. He had nowhere to go. Literally, I asked his sister, and his sister said, no, I'm not going to let a man I call my dad.
Just when I moved back to Indiana, there was a bunch of my friends that had said she had slept with them after she had slept with me.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
But she thinks Zach's the dad, but he can't do nothing with her. He's not allowed.
And yes, she did let me in one time to see Jordan.
3
but
times.
any other times, she slammed the door in my face.
Except for the night you spent the night and you had sex with her, which was just 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Sleeping around is all I've got to say.
No. He came over with his friend, and he was drunk.
Why do you doubt that your son is her child's father when you know your son was in a relationship with her?
This court case unfolds as a deeply complicated paternity dispute that brings together former partners, family members, and new relationships, all standing before Judge Lauren Lake in search of one answer that could permanently change their lives. At the center of the case is a young child whose future depends on truth, evidence, and the legal process. What begins as doubt quickly transforms into a full courtroom examination involving accusations, emotional testimonies, and ultimately, a DNA test that people regret taking but cannot escape once the results are revealed. The courtroom is filled with tension as the mother arrives determined to prove she has been honest all along. She explains that false accusations have followed her for years, damaging her reputation and creating chaos in her child's life. She claims that her ex-partner and his family repeatedly questioned the child's paternity, pushing a narrative that went beyond reasonable doubt and entered the territory of personal attacks. On the evidence stage in this divorce-like dispute, emotions are raw and trust is clearly broken. Her former partner appears alongside his mother, openly admitting that he is unsure whether he is the biological father. What shocks the courtroom is not just his uncertainty, but the alternative theory he presents. He claims that the child's biological father could possibly be his own father. This accusation instantly changes the tone of the case and highlights the fragile relationship between law and justice when family boundaries become blurred. Judge Lauren Lake listens carefully, recognizing that this is no ordinary paternity claim, but a situation that raises serious moral and legal questions. As testimony continues, the court hears about living arrangements, blurred household boundaries, and decisions that now seem questionable in hindsight. The mother explains that she allowed her ex-partner's father to stay in her home during a difficult period, insisting there was nothing inappropriate about the situation. However, the opposing side argues that these circumstances alone justify doubt. This clash of narratives demonstrates a core concept of justice in jurisprudence. Suspicion is not proof, and claims must be supported by credible evidence. The courtroom becomes a space where truth changes everything. Statements are challenged, timelines are questioned, and inconsistencies are highlighted by both sides. Judge Lauren Lake carefully navigates the testimony, reminding everyone that personal judgments and moral opinions cannot replace legal standards. This moment reflects the relationship between law and justice, where fairness depends on facts, not emotions or assumptions. As the case progresses, the issue of a DNA test takes center stage. The father admits that part of him fears the results, understanding that many people regret taking a DNA test once it permanently defines their role in a child's life. Still, the court makes it clear that speculation cannot resolve a dispute of this magnitude. This is not just a family argument. It is a legal determination that affects child support, parental rights, and the child's long-term stability. The presence of additional witnesses adds complexity to the case. A new partner steps forward, claiming to have taken on a parental role, helping raise the child daily. This introduces another layer to the evidence stage in what resembles a divorce case, even though the couple was never formally married. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges the emotional contribution of this individual, but clarifies that emotional support does not determine biological paternity under the law. Throughout the hearing, the court examines claims of dishonesty, shifting stories, and alleged attempts to block parental access. The term adverse inference in Evidence Act becomes relevant as the judge considers whether any party's actions or refusals suggest hidden truths. However, the court remains focused on objective proof rather than courtroom drama. When the DNA results are finally presented, the atmosphere changes instantly. The scientific evidence cuts through months of accusations, rumors, and emotional damage. The results confirm the biological father, disproving the most explosive allegations and restoring clarity. This moment perfectly reflects why DNA test cheating stories often end the same way. Speculation collapses under verified truth. Judge Lauren Lake uses this outcome to reinforce a powerful lesson about accountability. She emphasizes that the court's responsibility is not to punish emotions or past mistakes, but to protect the child's best interests. The ruling opens the door for formal child support arrangements, placing responsibility where it legally belongs. The mention of Supreme Court child support standards reminds everyone that family courts operate within a broader legal framework designed to protect children, not egos. Beyond biology, the case also touches on themes found in adoption stories, full episodes, and celebrate recovery testimonies, where families are forced to rebuild after painful truths are revealed. While this case does not involve adoption, it highlights how children can become collateral damage when adults fail to resolve conflict responsibly. In a broader sense, the courtroom becomes a live example of topics often discussed on platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast, the Game Changing Attorney podcast, and the Divorce Course podcast. The case illustrates how legal outcomes can reshape personal identity, redefine family roles, and permanently alter relationships. It also shows how evidence, when properly examined, can bring resolution even in the most emotionally charged situations. As the hearing concludes, Judge Lauren Lake reminds all parties that while the DNA test resolved paternity, healing will take more than a court order. Trust must be rebuilt, boundaries must be respected, and the child's emotional well-being must remain the priority. The court's decision marks the end of legal uncertainty, but the beginning of long-term responsibility. This case stands as a powerful reminder of why courts exist, not to entertain conflict, but to uncover truth. It demonstrates how the concept of justice in jurisprudence is applied in real life, where science, law, and human emotion intersect. By the end of the proceedings, the courtroom delivers not just a verdict, but a clear message. Truth may be painful, but it is the only foundation on which real justice can stand. As the case moves deeper into the legal process, the focus shifts from accusations to accountability. Judge Lauren Lake makes it clear that once a DNA test enters the evidence stage, the courtroom is no longer a place for speculation or emotional storytelling. It becomes a space governed by facts, timelines, and responsibility. Every person present understands that the outcome will not just settle an argument, but redefine parental roles forever. The biological mother continues to explain her position, emphasizing that she has carried the burden of doubt for years. She describes how repeated accusations affected her mental health and disrupted her ability to provide stability for her child. In her testimony, she explains that While people often talk about DNA test cheating stories as entertainment, the reality is far more painful when it happens in real life. Each accusation forced her to defend herself not only as a partner, but as a parent. Her former partner responds with visible frustration. He explains that his doubts were not created in isolation, but fueled by family pressure, rumors, and inconsistencies he believed existed in the past. He admits that once suspicion took root, it grew uncontrollably, proving the idea that people regret taking truth-based steps too late rather than too early. Judge Lauren Lake listens carefully, reminding him that doubt alone does not excuse years of emotional distance from a child. The courtroom also hears from the father's mother, who strongly influenced his decision to pursue the case. She explains her belief that protecting her son meant questioning everything. However, Judge Lauren Lake addresses her directly, clarifying that interference without evidence can damage families beyond repair. This moment highlights the relationship between law and justice, showing how personal loyalty can sometimes conflict with fairness and truth. As the discussion continues, the judge references legal principles often explored in the Game Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast. She explains that family court is not about winning arguments, but about protecting children from instability. Every claim made in court must serve the child's best interest, not adult pride. This reminder brings the courtroom back to its core purpose. Attention returns to the DNA evidence, which now stands as the most powerful voice in the room. The results remove all ambiguity and eliminate alternative theories presented earlier. Judge Lauren Lake explains that once scientific proof is introduced, the law no longer entertains hypothetical possibilities. This is where truth changes everything, transforming speculation into certainty and forcing all parties to accept the outcome. The confirmed father reacts with mixed emotions. On one hand, there is relief that the uncertainty is over. On the other, there is the heavy realization of responsibility. Judge Lauren Lake addresses this directly, stating that biology alone does not make a parent, action does. She explains that child support obligations are not punishment, but protection, aligning with Supreme Court child support principles designed to safeguard a child's future. The discussion briefly turns to the concept of adverse inference in Evidence Act, as the judge notes how hesitation, avoidance, or delayed testing can create unnecessary suspicion. While no legal penalty is imposed for emotional reactions, the court emphasizes that transparency earlier in the process could have spared everyone years of conflict. This lesson resonates strongly throughout the courtroom. A significant moment arises when the new partner speaks again, expressing concern about the child's emotional stability. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges his involvement but makes a critical distinction between emotional presence and legal parenthood. This mirrors themes often found in adoption stories' full episodes, where love and biology intersect but do not always align under the law. The courtroom atmosphere softens as Judge Lauren Lake delivers guidance rather than judgment. She encourages all parties to celebrate recovery testimonies as examples of how families can heal after painful truths are revealed. She explains that while the court can establish legal facts, emotional recovery must happen outside its walls. The mother expresses hope that the ruling will finally allow her child to grow up without uncertainty. She emphasizes that her goal was never to exclude the father, but to end the cycle of doubt that followed them for years. Her words reinforce the idea that justice is not only about legal outcomes, but about restoring peace. Judge Lauren Lake then addresses the broader implications of the case, explaining how disputes like this are often discussed on platforms such as the Truth Changes Everything podcast. She notes that while these cases may appear dramatic, they represent real families facing life-altering decisions. The courtroom, she reminds everyone, is not a stage. It is a place where futures are decided. As the hearing moves toward closure, the judge outlines the next legal steps, including formalizing parental rights, visitation arrangements, and child support responsibilities. She emphasizes that compliance is not optional, reinforcing how family court decisions carry the authority of law, grounded in the concept of justice in jurisprudence. The final moments of this portion of the case reflect a shift from confrontation to consequence. The accusations that once dominated the courtroom now feel distant, replaced by the undeniable clarity of evidence. Judge Lauren Lake's role transitions from investigator to guide, helping the parties understand what the ruling means for their lives moving forward. This part of the story shows that while DNA tests resolve biological questions, they also open emotional ones. People may regret taking them, but without them, families remain trapped in doubt. The courtroom serves as proof that truth, once revealed, demands responsibility. As the case reaches its final stage, the courtroom atmosphere shifts from argument to reflection. Judge Lauren Lake reminds everyone present that family court is not designed to reward persistence in accusation, but commitment to truth. At this point, the evidence has spoken clearly, and the legal system now turns its focus toward responsibility, future stability, and the long-term impact on the child at the center of the dispute. The confirmed father now stands in a position that cannot be reversed. The DNA test, which once felt like a threat, has become a permanent legal reality. Judge Lauren Lake explains that many people regret taking truth-seeking steps because truth removes choice. Once biological paternity is established, the law requires action, not emotion. This is where the court draws a firm line between denial and duty. The mother addresses the court with a sense of relief rather than triumph. She explains that her goal was never humiliation or revenge, but clarity. For years, she lived under the shadow of suspicion, rumors, and public judgment. The courtroom provided the only place where evidence could replace gossip. Her testimony reinforces the idea that truth changes everything, not just legally, but emotionally and psychologically as well. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges the emotional toll this process has taken on all parties. However, she emphasizes that pain alone cannot override responsibility. The law exists to protect children from instability, and once paternity is confirmed, the court must act in alignment with that mission. This reflects the deeper relationship between law and justice, where fairness is achieved through structure, not sympathy. The discussion turns toward formal child support arrangements. Judge Lauren Lake explains that support is not a favor and not a punishment. It is a legal obligation rooted in Supreme Court child support principles that prioritize the child's well-being above all personal conflict. The court outlines how financial responsibility ensures access to basic needs, education, and long-term security. The father's earlier hesitation becomes relevant again, as Judge Lauren Lake addresses how delays and avoidance often complicate cases unnecessarily. She explains the concept of adverse inference in Evidence Act, clarifying that while emotions are understandable, prolonged resistance to clarity can deepen suspicion and damage trust. The court encourages openness early in disputes to prevent years of conflict. The father's mother, who played a significant role in escalating doubt, listens as the judge speaks directly about boundaries. Judge Lauren Lake explains that involvement driven by protection can cross into harm when it fuels accusations without proof. This moment highlights a recurring theme in family court. Intentions do not outweigh consequences. As the courtroom absorbs the ruling, attention briefly turns to the new partner who had stepped into a supportive role. Judge Lauren Lake commends his willingness to provide care, but reiterates that emotional presence does not replace legal responsibility. This echoes themes commonly explored in adoption stories' full episodes, where love and legality intersect but remain distinct under the law. The judge then broadens the discussion, framing the case within a larger societal context. She references how similar disputes are often discussed on platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where legal experts analyze how evidence reshapes family dynamics. She emphasizes that while such cases may attract attention, they represent real lives facing irreversible outcomes. Judge Lauren Lake also speaks to recovery and rebuilding. She notes that once truth is established, families have a choice: remain divided by past conflict or move forward with accountability. This reflection aligns with the spirit found in Celebrate Recovery Testimonies, where healing begins only after denial ends. The mother expresses hope that the ruling will allow her child to grow up with stability and certainty. She explains that children should never feel like evidence in a courtroom battle. Her words underscore the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where the law serves not just as a decision maker, but as a protector of future generations. The father is reminded that presence matters more than biology alone. Judge Lauren Lake makes it clear that showing up consistently, emotionally and physically, will define his role more than any test result. The court emphasizes that legal recognition is only the beginning of true parenthood. As proceedings draw to a close, Judge Lauren Lake summarizes the lessons of the case. Accusations without evidence damage trust, delay prolongs pain, and truth, while uncomfortable, is the only path to resolution. The courtroom becomes a place not of victory or defeat, but of accountability. The judge formally closes the case by outlining next steps, including documentation, visitation schedules, and enforcement measures. She stresses that compliance is mandatory and monitored, reinforcing the authority of the court and the seriousness of its rulings. In her final remarks, Judge Lauren Lake speaks directly to the broader meaning of the case. She explains that family court exists because children deserve certainty, not chaos. Adults may disagree, but the law must remain steady. This reinforces the fundamental balance between law and justice, where structure ensures fairness even when emotions run high. As the parties prepare to leave, the courtroom feels quieter, heavier, but clearer. The questions that once fueled conflict have been answered. The truth, once avoided, now stands unchallenged. For some, it brings relief. For others, it brings responsibility. But for the child, it brings clarity. This case serves as a powerful reminder that DNA tests are not just scientific procedures. They are turning points. People may fear them, delay them, or regret them, but once taken, they reshape lives permanently. The courtroom exists to ensure that reshaping happens with fairness, order, and accountability. In the end, Judge Lauren Lake's ruling reflects the core purpose of family court. Not drama, not blame, but truth, responsibility, and protection. The case closes not with celebration, but with certainty, the kind that allows life to move forward.